Hello, I'm Dylan, otherwise known as Dark Moon on the internet, and I'm here today to try and explain Dune as straightforward and simple as possible while including all the characters, all the details. I think I can do it. It's not that complicated of a book. It's pretty short. Dune's only about 800 pages. Not that complicated. I don't think so. Well, yeah, we can do it. We can do it pretty quick, I think, yeah. So let's get to it. So, here's what we're working with. And, it's fine. Where to start? So, we will start right here with the spice melange, because that's the most important thing to the series. Spice melange is found on one planet. That planet is Arrakis, otherwise known as Dune by the Fremen, which we'll get to in a minute. The spice melange has a lot of properties. The main one is that it slows your aging, but also it helps the various factions of, or schools of thought, not factions. These aren't really factions. These are schools of thought more. It helps them in various different ways. You've got the mentats, who have taken place of like your calculators, your statisticians. These are your statisticians. Almost every great house has one, maybe two mentats. Well, hold on a second. I'm trying to remember. I don't think Gurney's a mentat, actually. Well, okay, so I think I got this one mixed up, because I think this one goes to Count Fenring, and we'll get to all the characters and who they are in a minute. Okay, so you got mentats. They've taken place of our calculators. They're more math focused, and they use the spice melange. Well, some of them do, but most of them use spice melange to figure out the math. And again, spice melange is only found on Arrakis, which is why it's so sought after, because it's so rare. It's only on this one planet in the whole galaxy, on the whole universe. And that's pretty cool to me. I think that's a cool idea, the fact that there's this one... Well, one of the cooler aspects, and one of the reasons why I think Dune is so interesting and important, is that it's kind of timeless. You can replace Arrakis and the spice melange with the Middle East and oil. It's this valuable resource, and everyone wants to control it. And it's only in this one spot, or at least most of it is in this one spot. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's stayed very relevant, this book. Frank Herbert looked around him and went, well, here's the deal. And there we go, spice melange. But yeah, the mentats use it, and the Spacing Guild uses it. This fell on the floor, so it's got some gunk on the tape, which is kind of gross. Got the Spacing Guild. The Spacing Guild have a monopoly on space travel. Their navigators are super secret. No one's ever really seen one. And the reason why is because they've horribly mutated due to just how addicted to the spice melange they are. But they use the spice to see... They actually have prescience. That's a light spoiler. But they have prescience, which we'll get into prescience, because prescience is future vision, and that is a huge part of the series, not just this book. And so are the Spacing Guild. The Spacing Guild will stay pretty relevant throughout the series, from what I've read anyway. I've only gotten to Children of Dune. And so will the Bene Gesserit. In fact, the Bene Gesserit, I think it's pronounced Bene Gesserit because it's based off of the Jesuits, so it's fairly certain it's Jesuit. But sometimes I pronounce it Bene Gesserit because I'm dumb. They are a school of women who they are all linked to all their genetic memories, which is fascinating. I love the idea of genetic memory. It's one of the very few cool things about the Assassin's Creed series. And they can only see the female side of history, which is why they're only women, because of the genetic code, XX, as opposed to XY. They can only see all the X. They can't see the Y. And because of that, they've been playing the biggest eugenics game of all time. They have been breeding various families and people, hoping to get what they call the Kwisatz Haderach, which is going to be the male Bene Gesserit, because Bene Gesserit, sorry. And the reason why they need to breed for this is because they take a certain type of drug and a certain type of strain of melange that they've mingled with other things, and it will kill a male if they drink it. It can only be used by a Bene Gesserit who's been highly trained. And there's various types of Bene Gesserit. They're fascinating. They're very interesting, actually. You can learn the ways of the Bene Gesserit if you're a male or a female, as we will see later in the series and in this book. And like you'll be able to completely read a person who just walked into the room. You'll completely know their deal, what they're thinking, what they've been doing for the past day, all sorts of stuff. They're like Sherlock Holmes on crack. They are just insanely intelligent and interesting people. They're one of the most fascinating parts of the series for me. I think they're really cool. Again, they've been planning for this child for centuries, for millennia. It's really interesting. They've been breeding and interbreeding all these different families and stuff, and is very fascinating. So we're going to get to the families next now. I also just wanted to break down the blue lines mean that these various characters are like part of these factions. Spice Melange isn't really a faction, but it's up here because it's very important. And then we will get to the houses now. These are the only 3 great houses that matter to the series so far. These are the only ones that have ever really been talked about or covered. We have House Atreides, who is our main house. Also, these brown yarn are kind of just segregators. We have House Atreides, who's kind of our main house. They have our main characters. They are highly, how would I describe them? They are highly charming. They win people over very easily. They're genuine. They are also genuine people for the most part. We'll get into some theories and some ideas involving that, but they are beloved people. And then we've got House Carino, who is your imperial house. They look over all of the other houses and make sure they all stay in line, that there's not chaos. This is your imperial family. You have Emperor Shaddam IV, who is the emperor, and his Sardaukar, which is his army that he raises on the planet Seleucia Secundas, which is just this horrible, miserable planet that, like, horrible environment. So they've been raised and, like, tortured into the most badass soldiers of the entire galaxy, universe. You've got House Harkonnen, or Harkonnen, which is this house full of just horrible people. These are this is your terrible people. These are terrible people. They're scheming and conniving and just awful people. They have control of Arrakis at the start of the book. And then we've got the Fremen, who are the natives of Arrakis. They've been there for millennia. They've seen various houses come in and out. They are led by the mysterious Liet, how I'm pretty sure that's pronounced. No one really knows who he is from in terms of the great houses. They don't really know. In fact, most of the houses don't know much about the Fremen because they live in the desert, the deep, deep desert of Arrakis, which Arrakis is a planet just as horrible as Seleucus Secundus. It's this desert planet, horrible, horrible desert storms. There's barely any water or condensation in the atmosphere. It's miserable. They wear these things called the Fremen, and anyone who goes out into the desert wear these things called still suits, which just completely recycles all of your water and liquids. So, like, you put on this mask and put in these nose plugs, and all of the condensation from your breath gets recycled into the suit. All of your sweat gets recycled into the suit. All of your urine gets recycled into the suit. And then you use the water that gets purified and extracted from all that, and you drink that, you save that. That's what you need to do in order to survive on Arrakis. And the Fremen are just the ultimate people. They've been living on Arrakis forever. They know all of the ins and outs. They know all sorts of things. They can ride the sandworms, who are these massive worms, just huge, bigger than anything you can imagine. They're amazing, the Fremen. They're one of the most realized fictional people, just as realized as Tolkien's elves, just as realized as anything like ever written. These are some of my favorite fictional people. In fact, most of the houses and stuff, they all feel genuine and real, and that's amazing. Just props to Frank Herbert for making this huge galaxy feel like it has a genuine history to it. And I think that's another reason why this book has stayed so relevant. Expect full spoilers, though Dune is hard to spoil because it is genuinely fairly straightforward, despite this complex kind of web of characters. Yeah. So anyway, we've got the Fremen who hate the Harkonnens. And they become allied with House Atreides eventually. And we have House Atreides who hates House Harkonnen. They've had a family feud for years, decades, centuries, generations at the very least. So they're allied. House Corrino secretly hates House Atreides, which I don't know if you can notice, but I tried to kind of marker that a little bit, make it darker, more secretive than the blatant ones, because the Emperor Shaddam IV specifically sees Duke Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac in the upcoming movie, which I think is just perfect. He sees Duke Leto as competition because Duke Leto is super charming and attractive, and he's won over all of the great houses. They all think he's just absolutely fabulous. On top of that, he also has been training his soldiers. He has some of the best soldiers in the galaxy, in the universe, just from sheer training alone because of your Gurney Hallecks and Thufir Hawats. And because of that, Emperor Shaddam IV sees him as a threat and wants him to be wiped out now, before he could potentially harm his position on the throne and harm the current ongoings of the galaxy. I keep saying galaxy, but it's a bigger scope than that, of the universe. So yeah, they have this secret hatred for the Atreides, and because of that, they have allied with the Harkonnens to overthrow them and destroy them. Oh no! So yeah, the Imperial House, House Corrino, are allied with House Harkonnen to overthrow the Atreides because of just all that complicated stuff. Yeah, it's not that complicated. He hates him, or is jealous of him. He actually relents later on in the book how much that he loved him and wish he could have been like a son or something, married into the family. So, I mean, now that the house relationships are all covered, we can start getting into the story and the characters a little bit more. Not that many characters. So you got Duke Leto Atreides, who I've already covered a little bit, and his concubine, Lady Jessica. They've never officially married due to political reasons. Duke Leto thinks that he could marry into power or use his position of power to negotiate terms and the like with another house, another family, something like that, if he's openly available. It would be a political marriage, not a real thing, because his love is purely reserved for Lady Jessica. He even tells his son, Paul Atreides, later on in the book, how much he regrets not marrying his wife. They are considered wife and husband and wife. They are that deeply in love, but they just can't. He just couldn't do it because he couldn't help but think of the political matters, and that's kind of tragic in a way. Especially later on in the story, as we'll find out. So yeah, they're in love, and they have a child who is called Paul. He serves as our main character. He is the next in the line for the ducal throne, but Paul was technically a generation too early. Lady Jessica was commanded by the Bene Gesserit, especially the Imperial Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam. Sorry, her name always trips me up. She was just commanded to have a daughter, because in the planning of the Bene Gesserit, her daughter would then, or her theoretical daughter, would be married to Fade Rotha. I've never learned how to pronounce his name. I think it's Rotha. Her proposed daughter, theoretical daughter, would be married and betrothed to Fade Rotha to end the feud. Between House Harkonnen and House Atreides. And then their child would be a son, and he would be the Kwisatz Haderach. So Paul is kind of a generation early, because Lady Jessica is in love with her husband, her duke, so much that she decided, screw that, he wants a son, I'm giving him a son. Because again, Bene Gesserit, complete control of their bodies, complete control of all sorts of things. She's able to decide whether or not it's a son or a daughter. She gives him a son, so that he has an heir to his throne. Much to the dismay of the Bene Gesserit and the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam. So the start of the book is Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam visiting the Atreides on their home planet of Caladan. It's this lush, green, gorgeous, water-filled planet, as we'll find out how important water is to the series. And she's come to test Paul Atreides to see if he's human, to see if he has the qualities that make you truly human. And that involves this thing called the Gom Jabbar. Won't go too into detail about that. Gom Jabbar is a thing of poison on the tip of their finger. It's a needle, and they will poke you with it if you pull your hand out of this box that is giving you horrible amounts of pain. I said I wouldn't go into too much detail, but that's a lot of detail. And she puts Paul through this test to see if he's truly human, because that's the first step in becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. He passes the test. In fact, he goes through more pain than any female trained Bene Gesserit ever went through. The Reverend Mother is really impressed with him and thinks that he might actually be the one. But he lets Jessica, or she lets Jessica know that there's that he could be the one, but there's no hope for the Duke that in this upcoming trade gift that House Atreides will be receiving from House Carino, Duke Leto will eventually die through various means, whatever means necessary. Essentially, House Carino is gifting the Atreides the planet Arrakis, and they get to control it. They get to control the spice, as opposed to the Harkonnens. So House Carino taking it away from House Harkonnen to give it to House Atreides. And Duke Leto isn't a fool. He knows that it's a trap, but he thinks that he has the team and abilities necessary to take care of it, to be able to maneuver through this trap. And Paul overhears the fact that his dad doesn't have any hope to live, basically, and he is kind of horrified by this and upset by it. And yeah, it's a lot to go through for a young 15-year-old boy. And that's something that kind of keeps getting brought up, that he seems so mature for his age. So you've also got these characters down here. You've got Duncan Idaho, Gurney Halleck, and Thufir Hawat, and Dr. Yue. They are all super important to helping Duke Leto lead, and they're also all the teachers of Paul Atreides. Duncan Idaho is a sword master. Gurney Halleck is he's just a badass dude. He's a badass soldier. Yeah, I think he's a general, something along those lines. And Thufir Hawat is the Duke's main mentat for the most part, and Dr. Yue is a doctor. He's a teacher. He has been Imperial conditioned, which means he can't kill another person. He can't betray another person. But we'll get into that. But yeah, Duncan Idaho is such a badass, that swordsman, that they actually send him from Caladan first to Arrakis and to the Fremen to make peace with the Fremen, because Duke Leto sees the potential of the Fremen and sees that their hate of the Harkonnens could be their greatest asset, their greatest tool for fighting the Harkonnens whenever they do eventually come and reclaim Arrakis for themselves. So Duncan Idaho gets sent down there first while they're all preparing. And that's what a good first 100 pages of the book is you're learning who Paul Atreides is, you're learning who Gurney Halleck is, you're learning who Thufir Hawat is, you're learning about Dr. Yue and how his wife has been stolen by the Harkonnens, and they've been torturing her, and that broke his Imperial conditioning, and he is now being essentially blackmailed to betray the Duke, and he doesn't want to do it. He loves Lady Jessica and Paul Atreides and Duke Leto. He loves all of them, and he thinks they're great people, and he feels horrible for what he's gonna have to do for his wife. He feels awful about it, and you learn all this. This is, I think a lot of people have troubles with how slow the first act of the book is, but I think that first act being so slow is a great thing. You learn a lot about these characters and what they stand for, what they fight for. Gurney Halleck, his sister and family were all killed by the Beast Raban over there from House Harkonnen during an attack on Caladan many years ago. And Thufir Hawat, he's a fairly straightforward character. There's not much to him, actually. But, you know, you learn about him. You hear how cool Duncan Idaho is. You haven't even met Duncan Idaho in the book yet. And it's just really interesting. Another interesting thing about how the book is set up is you don't meet any of the Imperial characters for a good chunk of the book as well. You never even see Emperor Shaddam IV until the last like 100 pages of the book. Princess Arulan is a constant presence. She's also a Bene Gesserit. She's a constant presence in the book because she serves as your introduction to each chapter. There are these little passages from various things, all from the future. She's your historian. She's talking about each of her introductions kind of give you an idea as to what each chapter is going to be focusing on and be about. And so you kind of get some sense of her and what her ideologies are and what she might be thinking throughout the book, but you don't meet her until you meet the Emperor either. In fact, you don't even meet her until after you meet the Emperor, I don't think, if I recall correctly. And I just think that that's kind of really interesting because all these characters feel so fleshed out and they stick out in my mind. They stick out for far more than they should, considering Emperor Shaddam IV is barely in the book. But for some reason, he sticks out to me. I remember him. He has a character arc. He has these thoughts and emotions. And I think that's just fascinating how much is just in this book. So anyway, Dr. Yue confirmed to be a traitor to the Atreides eventually, as Duncan Idaho is winning over the Fremen. I think it's like the second or third chapter, you get one of the very few chapters from the Harkonnens' perspective. You get introduced to basically all of the Harkonnen characters. You get introduced to Vladimir Harkonnen, the Baron Harkonnen. He is this disgustingly obese individual who likes to have sex with underage children. He's particularly boys. He's not a great person in the slightest, but he is scheming and brutal in his machinations and schemes. But Piter Derviz, his right-hand man, his mentat, is even worse. He's an even worse person. He's the one that broke Dr. Yue. He is really disturbed and messed up, and he is heavily addicted to the spice. Baron Harkonnen takes that advantage every chance he gets to hold that over Piter. And then you've got the Baron's two nephews, Beast Raban, who has basically been in control of Arrakis, specifically Arrakeen, the city of Arrakis, like the main city of Arrakis. He's been in charge of that for the last several years. And you don't get much of him in that chapter, and you don't get much of him in the book, period. Baron Harkonnen thinks he's plain and simple and stupid. He doesn't really like him. But Fade, ooh, Baron Harkonnen loves Fade. That's also his nephew. He is the brother of Beast Raban. But yeah, he is so in love with Fade that they have a sexual relationship that is pretty much open in the novel and talked about a couple times. And you get the sense that Fade is kind of not okay with it. He's using the fact that his uncle is so attracted to him to his advantage, because his uncle is grooming him to be the next Baron once he's dead. And Fade is even referred to as the Na Baron. And yeah, Fade's kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna put up with this, I guess, until I get the Baronhood. All part of the plan. I gotta deal with it. And yeah, so the Harkonnens, they've all got their schemes. The quote is plans within plans within plans. Their main plan is Dr. Yue is going to poison and not kill, but like incapacitate the Atreides so that Baron Harkonnen can come in and have his way with them, do whatever he wants, kill them brutally, whatever. And then while that's happening, Baron the Harkonnens' own armies and a couple of legions of Sardaukar, disguised as Harkonnens, are going to completely demolish the Atreides' armies and just snuff them out. That's the Harkonnens' plan, and you learn that in like the second or third chapter. And then from that point on, it's all about the Atreides moving to Arrakis and getting associated with the Fremen. You get introduced to Stilgar, who is he is a leader of a tribe of Fremen. I can't remember exactly the name of the tribe right now. It's been a month or two since I've read the book. So apologies for anything that I'm getting wrong. But I'm really excited about the upcoming movie, so I decided to just dive into this. And plus, I've always thought that most of the explanations for Dune aren't very fun. They're all fairly serious, and I'm trying to make it a little more energetic and a little more fun. Anyway, so they get in, Duncan Idaho and Stilgar get introduced to, well, actually, no. You get introduced to the Shadow Mapes. First, she is given to House Atreides as a servant, a slave, not a slave, but a servant, like a maid kind of a thing for Lady Jessica and the house in general. Once they get to Arrakeen, she actually kind of saves Paul's life, and Paul kind of saves hers, because there is a hunter-seeker, which is this little floating, like, droid thing that is looking to kill Paul in his room once he gets to Arrakis. And she opens the door, and he grabs it and smashes it to pieces. And she then is indebted to him, and is also indebted to Lady Jessica, because, here we go. So, every planet has this thing called the Missionaria Protectiva set in place by the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit basically planted these fake religions and fake ideas into every planet so that if a Bene Gesserit were to get stuck or stranded on that given planet, they would be able to manipulate their way to power and to safety. So, this is what happens between the Shadow Mapes and Lady Jessica. Shadow Mapes considers that she might be the one from the prophecy, because the prophecy is always so vague, and Lady Jessica is like, alright, and Paul's also involved with that prophecy as well. This prophecy that they both end up basically manipulating into their survival. Yeah, they do it to survive. But Lady Jessica goes through this thing and proves that she is the chosen one of the Fremen prophecy. And yeah, later on in the book, Duncan Idaho comes back to the House Atreides on Arrakeen with Stilgar, introduces him to Stilgar. Stilgar is very impressed with Duke Leto, and he spits in front of Duke Leto and all of these people, and Duke Leto's men all start freaking out. Even Paul kind of is like, what the hell? And Duke Leto goes, stop, don't you guys realize how important water is to the Fremen? And then he spits in return, and they all go, oh, okay. And yeah, that's a great moment to me. I'm butchering it completely because, again, hammers home that Duke Leto and the Atreides are just really respected, and that they also, it kind of hammers home the Fremen's. First off, it hammers home their mystery, because everyone's like, oh my god, a Fremen. But also it hammers home their, just how valuable water is for the Fremen. But essentially, Duncan Idaho is like, I'm going to join the Fremen for a while. I'm going to work with them. Is that okay? And Duke Leto was like, yeah, go ahead. We need these people. And yeah, there's a whole dinner dining room scene that would be impossible to summarize very briefly, and is probably not going to be in the film because that is an impossible scene to adapt to film. It is a scene almost entirely based off of the characters Lady Jessica and Paul Atreides reading all of these other characters. I think you're introduced to Count Fenring in there and Lady Fenring. But yeah, it is political maneuvering all while having dinner. It's a great chapter, but also a chapter that people could get very lost in very easily. But I say stick with that and get through it. I think the book is very rewarding once you get. It's a very rewarding read to me. You learn more and more as you read the book. There's never a moment that seems to be repeating an idea or repeating a specific thing. It all divulges the information very naturally. There's no expositrons where they stop the plot to explain what a Fremen is. No, they very naturally introduce all of the concepts, in my opinion. They do it very slowly, and that's the issue, I think, for a lot of people, is how slowly they do it. And it's also sometimes just stuck between a whole chapter of people eating dinner. Like, I can see how people don't appreciate that kind of stuff. But I think the very next chapter, Duke Leto meets the planetologist Kynes, which I learned is actually pronounced Keynes. He's been studying Arrakis for like ever. He's actually from Arrakis. He knows all about Arrakis. He knows all the deals. He's been hired by House Carino to explain all the goings on of Arrakis and the planet. And Keynes learns that, oh hey, Duke Leto's a great guy, because they go out to check on the spice mines and spice mining. And this is where we get our first sandworm attack. And it eats the sandcrawler, the thing that they use to mine the spice from the sands. Paul is there too. But Duke Leto sees that the sandworm is coming, and he almost sacrifices his own life. He doesn't die, but like, he puts his own life in danger and the life of his son in danger to save these people. He puts his life in danger to save these people that he's never met. Because he's a good guy, but also to show his appreciation to the people and hopefully gain the favor of the people. And he gains Keynes' favor. Keynes goes, damn, it's a shame that the Emperor is going to kill this man because he's great. And yeah, that's ultimately the point of that chapter, is to win Keynes over. He now is playing for the Atreides, actually, and will continue to support them throughout the book. Hey, this video ended up being a lot longer than I planned, so I actually am having to split this up into 2 parts, because yes, we're only halfway through in this nearly 40-minute long video. Sorry about that, but thank you for watching if you got this far. Congratulations if you got this far. Part 2 is going to be full of action. This was a lot of setup, but part 2 is going to have a bit more action than this part. Yeah, please subscribe if you enjoyed, and even click that like button if you enjoyed. But be sure to subscribe so you can at least keep up and see the next video whenever that comes out. I don't know when. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.